Okay, so welcome everybody. My name's Nick Warburton from Global Distribution. I'll be hosting the webinar today. Also on the line is Kelly Kelly and Anthony from Infortrend. For those of you, I think I've had a message that's still trying to join. There should have had a web link sent through which you can click on to get in. If you can't still join, then we'll obviously it's being recorded and we'll get your copy across. Brilliant. Okay, so this webinar will mainly focus around the EonStorGSe series and how that applies to media applications. Let's have a quick look through the agenda. So I'll just say a few words to start with about Infortrend, their corporate background, etc., and a little bit about the usual slides on data growth. We'll have a look at the solution overview and specifically for the GS series. We're going to touch on briefly the CS series, which we did the webinar on last week, which was well attended, but I know a few people didn't manage to make it. So we will just touch briefly over that again. And then we'll talk about the easy management configuration with the EonOne software and client utility EonView, which is common to both the GS and CS platforms. So Infortrend, for those that don't know, many of you might be familiar for them for quite some time now, established in '93. You might have been familiar with their blocks storage series, the DS series, which is obviously still a current product from them. We're not going to talk about it in this webinar, but maybe a lot of you have had experience of that product in the past. 800 plus employees around the world, listed on the Taiwanese stock exchange, etc. With offices, we have offices here in the UK. There's an office in Germany, and there are offices throughout Asia and the US as well. So very long established company. In terms of media storage, focusing around the GS and GSe platforms, they're suitable for small to sort of medium work groups. Starting from just a couple of users up to sort of 10 workstations, maybe a few more depending on what the applications are. As you'll see, the CS is obviously the cluster product, and that's obviously scales to many more users. In terms of video editing support, DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere, and Final Cut Pro or Final CPX, just to name a few. And then the software that we're going to be talking about is EonOne, which is their web management tool. Interestingly, they also have the ability to run DaVinci Project Serve on the hardware itself, so you don't need a separate hardware server platform to run that. You can actually run that on the GS and CS platforms, which is interesting for those of you that are working with DaVinci Resolve. And then the EonView client, which is a smart client available for Mac and Windows, and that utility just helps users easily connect to the storage and see the data that they're, or the folders that they're entitled to see. So that makes administrators' jobs much more easy. In terms of the solution portfolio for the GS series, this graph just gives you a snapshot of the GS 2000, 3000, 4000, and then the CS, the larger CS series. It is worth noting that actually the GS does start smaller. There is a desktop 5-bay and 8-bay available. GSe Pros, which aren't mentioned in this presentation, but if you have customers that are looking for a desktop option, then Infortrend also have that to offer, and all the features that we're going to talk about here are pretty much common across the whole product range. And that's one of the interesting things from a partner point of view, is that Infortrend have that ability to deliver a solution to you for your customers from anything from a desktop through to kind of petabytes in a whole rack tile floor print. So they've got a good range. They're one-stop shop, as it were, for NAS product. In general, there are 3 performance options, or 3 tiers for the GS series. There's the first is the entry-level GS 2000, so the 16-bay is good for, as you can see here, sort of 13 streams of 4K video. We have the mid-range, which is the GS 3000, that with 32 drives, so 216 bays ahead in expansion, is good for 18 streams, and then the 4000 series maxes out at 26 streams, and that's a head unit with two 16-bay expansions. And also helpfully gives you here an idea of the MSRP cost per terabyte. All these figures are based on being loaded with the 16 terabyte drive mechanisms. So all these solutions come fully integrated from Infortrend with options for advanced replacement over 3 years. That can be extended to 5, and also on-site warranties throughout most of EMEA for kind of next business day or a 4-hour on-site response. So the solution highlight for the GS series, its performance and scalability. As I was alluding to before, that kind of complete product line from desktop through to kind of full 60 disk 4U, enterprise products. Improved interoperability, especially with regards to DaVinci, but Adobe and Final Cut X as well. Easy management, very intuitive. As we'll see later in the slide deck, also various flexible I/O connections, which allow your customers to future-proof their systems, and also high availability. All of these systems are available either as a single or a dual controller sort of platform. So a little bit more about the DaVinci Project Serve integration. That actually runs in Docker for those of you that are familiar with the application. So there is actually no reason why other applications similar to the Project Serve couldn't be qualified to run as long as they can be integrated with the Docker app. So installing the DaVinci Resolve project management server is kind of akin to some of the Avid sort of workflows where it allows better cooperation between the editors. And the advantage of running the server on the storage is obviously you don't need a separate hardware to run it on, but also you've got a single centralized database and point to back up and restore if you need to, and then also that the system itself will send out automation notifications to clients if there are any errors occur. So that's a neat integration that Infortrend have been working on with Blackmagic. In terms of scalability on the GS series, the GS and GSe support up to 896 disks, which is in excess of 10 petabytes using the latest 16 terabyte hard drives. That's through a combination of the native onboard SAS controller, but there are also, when we go on to talk about it later, I/O options, so you can add sort of a second SAS expansion board to connect further hard drives. In terms of the storage expansion enclosures, you have a choice of 2. There's a 3U 16-bay, and then there's a high-density 4U 60-bay expansion system as well. As you'd expect, with Infortrend, they're very good at protecting your customers' ones and zeros. The GS and GSe and the CS, for that matter, have full disk RAID protection. Infortrend also have very complex algorithms that make rebuild times extremely fast. Also, they allow you to throttle that rebuild so that if you needed to, you could decrease the priority given to the rebuilds if required, if you needed the system to run at a higher performance. And as we'll see in the later slides, with regards to this clustered series, the CS, then we also support node replication or node protection rather, via either erasure coding or creating replicas of files, or indeed you can remote sync one cluster to a second cluster. High availability, as I said, is an option to have 2 controllers. HA at the moment on the GS is, I believe, confined to iSCSI targets. So SMB would be a fail back scenario. But regardless, this would provide an always-on service with hot swappable components and cooling power supplies, fans, etc., as you'd expect from Infortrend. All of the systems are toolless and very easy for an end user to replace failed components should that situation arise. Talking about the I/O connections on the GS and GSe and indeed the CS, those of you that have been familiar with the Infortrend for a while will know that most of the Infortrend systems will, in addition to having onboard I/O interfaces as default, they also provide the ability to add in additional Infortrend I/O boards for expansion. So these could be 10 gigabit, copper or optical, 25 gigabit. In the case of the GSe, other models also support 40 gigabit and SAS for expansion to further JBODs. And this is a really interesting point. As your customer, as technology moves on, the customer can protect their investment. You know, if they go with 10 gigabit now, they can upgrade to 25 gig, 50 gig, or potentially even 100 gig in the future as demand drives Infortrend to release those I/O boards. It's very easy to swap out one board and replace it with another board. So we're just going to do a few slides now on the CS series, which is their scale out NAS system. So one of the unique features of the scale out system for the CS is that it supports both horizontal scalability, scale out. So if you're thinking about products from EMC Isilon, that's a horizontal scale out system. You add nodes, you're increasing compute power and disks in a linear fashion. The CS supports that, but in addition, it also supports scale up, where you can just add storage expansion enclosures to the node to increase capacity, but not throughput or compute power, as it were. So that makes the scale outs, the CS, more attractive for high capacity requirements, large bit buckets, or work in progress volumes where the customer needs a large amount of data in a minimal footprint, but want the advantages of scale out to make the system easy to expand. So in terms of expansion, the CS supports over 100 gigabytes per second in read and write performance. That's equated to about 144 nodes. And those 140 nodes fully maxed out will give you over 100 plus petabytes of storage, which is obviously pretty significant. Here we can see how the systems scale up both in terms of vertical scalability and horizontal scalability. When you're scaling up vertically, if you have, for example, 3 nodes as we're showing here, you would have to add 3 expansion systems to each one of those nodes to increase the capacity. So when you're scaling out, scaling up, apologies, you have to scale up equally across all the nodes. One of the neat thing about the GS and CS is the ability to have all flash or hard drive nodes. So and Infortrend have data tiering algorithms, so you could have an all flash pool, for example, in your CS, and then a high density sort of 60 disk hard drive pool, and then you can set policies to tier data between those, so your fast or hot active data stays in your flash pool, and the data that's you're waiting for decisions on or is not relevant to have that kind of high performance flash access can stay on those hard drive pools. For data protection on the CS series, we support both erasure coding and replica mode. So erasure coding, as I'm sure most of you are aware, it's where the data or file is sliced and diced up into sort of n number of pieces and then has data attached to it, and then that metadata, and the data are effectively scattered across all the nodes in the cluster, and that provides you fault tolerance against not only hard drive failure in the node, but it also provides hardware protection against failure of a node itself. And as you can see here, I won't go through all of them. There's some basic examples of the different erasure coding levels and the kind of fault tolerance that they provide. And then we also have the replica option, which sounds as it is. This is where sort of individual files are replicated either sort of 2 or 3 times. One other interesting feature that the Infortrend CS series has is it also has a distributed mode. Now that will allow you to start from either 1 or 2 nodes. So as you can see, for erasure coding a replica, the minimum number of nodes you need is 3. But if you have a customer that needs to start smaller, then actually you can start with 1 or 2 nodes. And Infortrend have their own algorithm that will distribute data across those 1 or 2 nodes. The advantage of this is it's actually a higher performance system, but the disadvantage is that there's no node redundancy. So as you grow out your nodes, you wouldn't have the advantage of having any node redundancy. So if a node went offline due to control fail or whatever, then you'd have to wait for that hardware to be replaced before the data on that node would come back online and your cluster would be complete. So the EonOne storage management software is applicable, as I said, across both the GS and CS series. There's two types of user privilege. One is the M&E user administrator, and they can create users, assign quota management. They have a easy setup wizard for setting up the storage and networking. And then also, if you're using the DaVinci project serve, they have the ability to back up and restore those databases. And then there's a higher level system administrator, which is designed to set up and administrate the system as a whole. In typical time, sorry, let me start again. From power on, so once you've racked and stacked and got everything set up, from power on, even from the CS series, you're talking no more than 10 to 30 minutes to have your whole cluster up and running. It's very simple to do once the physical rack and stack and connections have been made. The storage management software EonOne, so this gives you a quick snapshot of, is your cluster healthy or is your unit healthy? Shows you the resource utilization of memory and CPU. If you're running your DaVinci server, it'll tell you whether your project server backup is good. It'll give you the number of shares that you have got, and number of users, and key here, it also gives you the capacity that you've got currently available. And then any critical errors or key errors are flagged up as well. So on the first pane on the overview, you can quite clearly see the whole state of the of either the GS or the CS cluster that you're managing. The EonView, as I mentioned at the beginning, that is the smart client that runs on Mac and Windows that makes the administrator's job and the user's job much more simple. You simply install the application, and that will automatically scan your IP network and grab all the settings from the storage that it needs. It'll mean that you can share folders, mounting them more easily. It'll provide event notifications of errors, etc. It'll also follow, obviously, the user from workstation to workstation. So if the user sits them down at a different workstation, logs into that smart client, it'll make all the folders that customer has access to available. So it's a really neat tool which takes some of the complexity out of NAS shares and the administration of them. So I think I've just sort of touched over this. There's really 4 sort of key steps to deploy. The system is 1, the administrator deploys and configures, and the M&E user would then set up the access controls and credentials. Editors simply install and fire up EonView on their workstation. The editors can log in with the credentials that have been given, and then EonView automatically scans the storage and mounts the work folders that are eligible for that particular user. Thank you everyone for attending. You know, I'm sure we're reaching peak webinar, if not peak anything else. I know you're probably all being bombarded by these requests, so thank you very much for your time. This is all part of a series from Global called Round the Kitchen Table. Any comments, any feedback, please do stay in touch with the social media. If you have any ideas for future webinars, things that you want to find out from Infortrend, be it more information on, you know, maybe their entry-level sort of desktop NAS series from the GS Pro, or maybe their systems for the DS, their block storage connections, etc. Then, or indeed any other storage topic that you would like myself or someone else to wax lyrical on for 30 minutes, then do please reach out, stay in touch with us with social media. Recording of this will be sent out, and if you have any questions, do just feel free to reach out to myself or one of your global account managers or Infortrend directly, and we'll do our best to help you out. So thanks once again, and everyone stay safe. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Nick.
Cheers,
Thank
bye.
you.